Brian May, the legendary guitarist of Queen, isn't just a rock icon. He's a survivor, a scientist, and a man who has carried the weight of unimaginable highs and heartbreaking lows. At 78, his story has taken turns that fans could never have predicted. From performing on some of the world's biggest stages, to battling personal struggles, health scares, and moments of deep vulnerability, May's journey has become far more than just about music. In recent years, fans have watched with concern as May faced one challenge after another: hospital visits, life-threatening incidents, and emotional confessions that revealed the man behind the guitar. For someone who once seemed untouchable, age and hardship have reminded us that even rock legends are human. But through it all, Brian May has continued to inspire. His honesty, his resilience, and his determination to keep sharing his music and his message have made his later years as meaningful as his time at Queen's peak. And yet, what happened to him at 78 is something that brings both tears and admiration. Because it's not just about what he lost. It's about what he fought to hold on to. This is the story of Brian May at 78, the struggles, the heartbreak, and the legacy he refuses to let slip away. Before the world knew him as Queen's legendary guitarist, Brian May was a boy with a telescope, a dream, and a homemade guitar that would one day change rock music forever. Born in 1947 in Hampton, England, Brian Harold May grew up in a modest household where music and curiosity were constant companions. His father, Harold, was an electronics engineer, and it was alongside him that Brian built what would become one of the most famous instruments in music history, the Red Special. Crafted from wood salvaged from an old fireplace and parts of a motorcycle, the guitar wasn't just an instrument. It was a piece of Brian's soul, designed to produce a sound unlike anything heard before. But Brian was more than just a guitarist in the making. He was a scholar, fascinated by science and the stars. While pursuing his studies in physics and astronomy at Imperial College London, music was his constant escape. It was here that he began forming bands, experimenting with sound, and finding his voice as both a musician and songwriter. His passion for blending precision with emotion would later become the heartbeat of Queen's unique sound. In 1970, when Brian May, drummer Roger Taylor, and an ambitious young singer named Freddie Mercury came together, the spark that would ignite a global phenomenon was lit. Shortly after, bassist John Deacon completed the lineup, and Queen was born. With Freddie's flamboyant presence, Roger's thunderous rhythm, John's steady grooves, and Brian's soaring guitar riffs, the band quickly became one of the most innovative forces in rock history. Their journey wasn't easy at first. The early gigs were small, the money scarce, and the critics often unforgiving. But Brian's determination kept him moving forward. He was the quiet force behind much of Queen's sound, responsible for writing anthems like "We Will Rock You," "Save Me," and "Who Wants to Live Forever." His ability to create music that was both deeply personal and universally powerful set him apart, and his guitar work, layered, melodic, and instantly recognizable, became the backbone of the band. By the late 1970s, Queen had become larger than life, filling stadiums around the world. Brian's riffs echoed through arenas packed with fans. His harmonies soared beside Freddie's vocals, and his quiet yet commanding stage presence earned him respect not just as a guitarist, but as a visionary musician. But while the spotlight grew brighter, shadows were also forming. The pressures of fame, the relentless touring schedule, and the expectations of millions began to weigh heavily on him. Behind his gentle smile and thoughtful demeanor, Brian was already beginning to face struggles that few outside his closest circle knew about. He wrestled with self-doubt, exhaustion, and the fear that he wasn't strong enough to carry the demands of stardom. And as Queen pushed boundaries with each album and performance, Brian's personal battles quietly deepened. The story of Brian May is not just one of meteoric success. It's also one of resilience. Because even in these early years, the seeds of both triumph and tragedy were being planted. He was on top of the world, yet in many ways the pressures were only just beginning. And as time would later reveal, the challenges Brian faced behind closed. Doors would prove every bit as monumental. As the music that made him a legend, Brian May's story at 78 cannot be told without first confronting the unshakable shadow of Freddie Mercury. The two men shared more than just a band. They shared a brotherhood that forever altered the course of rock history. Even decades after Freddie's passing, Brian admits that the grief has never truly gone away. "You don't get over it," he once confessed. "You just find ways to live with the absence." For Brian, that absence became both a burden and a driving force. In the years following Queen's explosive success, Brian often found himself questioning whether he deserved the adoration. He wasn't Freddie, the dazzling showman whose presence could electrify a stadium. Instead, Brian was the quieter one, the craftsman behind the soaring riffs of Bohemian Rhapsody and the anthemic chords of We Will Rock You. He was a perfectionist, often retreating into his music to deal with the chaos of the world. At 78, this perfectionism has become both a gift and a curse, leaving him exhausted yet unable to stop creating. Beyond the grief of losing Freddie, Brian carried his own silent battles. Few fans realized how deeply depression haunted him during the band's early years of survival without Mercury. He's admitted to long stretches where he considered walking away from everything, even life itself. The pressure of fame, the endless tours, and the scrutiny of fans and critics built up like invisible chains around him. And while millions adored the guitar god on stage, Brian often felt lonely and misunderstood when the crowds disappeared. His personal life also bore the weight of fame. His marriage to his first wife, Christine, collapsed under the strain of constant touring and the emotional toll of his depression. Later, his relationship with Anita Dobson, the actress who would eventually become his wife, was plagued by public judgment and the relentless magnifying glass of fame. Yet Anita remained one of the few people who anchored him through storms that seemed impossible to weather. Even now, she is a steady presence in his life, helping him face the challenges of age, health, and the immense responsibility of preserving Queen's legacy. But for Brian, perhaps the heaviest burden at 78 is not his physical health or even his mental struggles. It's the question of legacy. Queen is immortal, but how much longer can he carry that torch? Each time he steps on stage with Adam Lambert, who has taken on the near-impossible role of singing Mercury's songs, Brian feels the duality of pride and pain. Pride that Queen's music still unites generations. Pain that Freddie isn't there to see it. Fans cheer, arenas roar, but behind Brian's eyes, there is often a flicker of sorrow that never fades. And then there is his health. Brian May's body has paid a steep price for the decades of rock stardom. Years of wearing the guitar low on his body left his spine in constant agony. He has undergone multiple surgeries to relieve the pressure, and even simple daily routines can be a struggle. In 2020, the world gasped when Brian revealed he had suffered a small heart attack, needing stents placed to open his arteries. He admitted that for a moment he thought his time might be up. "I was very near death," he confessed. "But somehow I was given another chance." That near-death experience changed him. Suddenly, every day became both a blessing and a reminder of fragility. At 78, Brian is not the unstoppable rock god fans once saw running across stadium stages. He is slower, more careful with his movements, and sometimes visibly weary. Yet the fire in his soul refuses to burn out. Every time he picks up his legendary red special guitar, the one he built with his father as a teenager, he comes alive in a way that defies his years. The roar of the crowd, the energy of music, and the connection with fans seem to inject him with a second youth, if only for a few fleeting hours. What hurts most for fans to see is the toll it all takes once the lights fade. Brian May, the man who gave the world anthems of power and defiance, often retreats home to fight quiet battles with pain, regret, and the knowledge that time is no longer on his side. He has admitted that he thinks often about mortality and wonders how history will remember him, not just as the guitarist of Queen, but as a man. And yet, despite it all, the loss, the health scares, the depression, the weariness, Brian May continues to stand tall. At 78, he remains a symbol of resilience, proof that even when life takes almost everything from you, the spirit of music, love, and memory can keep you going. Still, behind the applause, the truth is clear. Brian is carrying heavy burdens, and each year feels more fragile than the last. By the time Jean-Claude Van Damme reached 64, the man who once embodied strength, agility, and the very definition of a martial arts hero was living a very different reality. The action star, known for his signature helicopter kicks and unmatched flexibility, could still pull off moves that stunned his fans, but age had slowed him down. His once perfectly sculpted body now carried the marks of decades of grueling workouts, onset injuries, and the unforgiving toll of time. Van Damme's health struggles didn't arrive suddenly. They built up quietly over the years. From the outside, fans only saw the glamour of red carpets, explosive fight scenes, and triumphant comebacks. But behind closed doors, Jean-Claude was in constant pain. His joints, especially his hips and knees, had endured relentless punishment from years of martial arts training and demanding stunts. Unlike many actors who relied heavily on stunt doubles, Van Damme insisted on performing his own fights, often pushing his body past its natural limits. Now, at 64, that dedication had left him fighting daily. Battles just to move without pain. Perhaps most heartbreaking was the reality that the very moves that made him a legend were now nearly impossible for him to perform without consequence. His iconic splits, once a trademark of his power and flexibility, were now more symbolic than practical. He could still execute them with discipline and effort, but the recovery afterward was brutal. Fans often cheered when he showcased the move in interviews or live appearances, but what they didn't see was the stiffness, soreness, and hours of therapy he needed afterward just to feel normal again. On top of physical struggles, Van Damme was open about his ongoing battle with mental health. Years earlier, he had revealed that he had been diagnosed with bipolar disorder, a condition that brought both creative highs and devastating lows. For a man who had once been at the absolute peak of global stardom, the lows were especially hard. He described nights of isolation, where he questioned whether he had given too much of himself to fame, and whether his body and spirit could handle the pressure any longer. At 64, those questions became even louder. Aging doesn't just wear down the body, it also forces reflection on the past, and for Van Damme, the regrets were many. He often spoke about the price of stardom on his family life. His marriages, 5 in total, including 2 to the same woman, Gladys Portugues, were filled with turbulence. His children admired his legacy, but they too witnessed the darker side of his struggles, the exhaustion, the mood swings, the relentless pursuit of perfection. For Jean-Claude, growing older meant confronting those missed moments, the times when fame mattered more than family, and realizing that some things could never be undone. Yet, despite all of this, Van Damme refused to fade away. He continued to train daily, pushing his body with discipline most men half his age couldn't match. His diet was strict, his routines were consistent, and he spoke about the importance of staying active not just for the body, but for the mind. Even when plagued by injuries, he found ways to adapt, swimming instead of running, light training instead of heavy combat drills. At 64, survival wasn't about proving himself on the big screen anymore. It was about proving to himself that he could keep going, but reality could not be ignored forever. The film roles that once came to him easily were fewer now. Hollywood had moved on to younger action stars, men who were walking the same path Van Damme once carved. Some fans wondered if he might retire completely, but Jean-Claude resisted the idea. For him, acting wasn't just about fame, it was about purpose. Without the cameras, without the stage, who was Jean-Claude Van Damme? It was a question he still wrestled with, even as the years weighed heavily on him. Public appearances showed the contrast starkly. On one hand, he could still command a crowd with his charisma, offering wisdom and flashes of his old charm. On the other, the camera sometimes revealed a man who looked tired, his face lined with age, his body stiff with pain. For longtime fans, seeing their idol like this was heartbreaking. They remembered the unstoppable warrior from Bloodsport and Kickboxer. And now they saw a man visibly carrying the scars of his battles, not just on screen but in real life. Still, perhaps the most inspiring part of Van Damme at 64 was his refusal to surrender. He acknowledged his pain, his regrets, and his struggles, but he never let them silence him. "I'm not the same man I was at 30, he admitted in one interview, but I can still fight, just differently." That fight wasn't about beating opponents in the ring anymore. It was about enduring, about facing life's hardships head-on, and about finding peace in the man he had become. At 64, Jean-Claude Van Damme stood as both a symbol of resilience and a reminder of time's unrelenting power. He was no longer the invincible fighter, but perhaps that was the point. His greatest battle was never on screen. It was the lifelong struggle to keep moving forward, even when everything in him wanted to stop. And that, more than any movie or split, may be the legacy he leaves behind. At 64, Jean-Claude Van Damme's story is no longer just about the muscles, the movies, or the martial arts moves that made him famous. His journey has become something far more human, something that reaches beyond Hollywood and into the hearts of fans who grew up idolizing him. The world saw him as the muscles from Brussels, the invincible warrior who could break bricks with a single strike. But today, what defines him most is not his power, it's his vulnerability. Van Damme himself has admitted that the years humbled him. The action star, who once seemed unstoppable, had to learn the hardest lesson of all, that no amount of training can stop time. The injuries, the fatigue, the wrinkles carved into his face, these became constant reminders that even heroes must one day slow down. Yet, in a way, it's in this stage of his life that Jean-Claude became more inspiring than ever. Fans who see him now don't just see a fighter, they see a survivor. He endured the brutality of fame, the chaos of broken marriages, the devastating lows of mental health struggles, and the physical pain of a body that endured decades of punishment. And yet here he stands at 64, not hiding from the truth of who he is, but embracing it. He tells his fans honestly about his battles, and in doing so, he gives them permission to face their own. What hurts most for longtime admirers is watching their hero wrestle with the shadows of his past. The Jean-Claude who once commanded box offices now lives with the reality that Hollywood's spotlight has shifted. Roles that once came easily are now rare. He's no longer the face on every movie poster, but instead a symbol of resilience, perseverance, and authenticity. For many, that's more powerful than any action scene he ever filmed. And while the decline of his stardom could have broken him, Van Damme has found a new purpose. He has embraced mentoring younger martial artists, occasionally stepping behind the camera and using his platform to encourage health, discipline, and balance in life. His message now is not, "Look at what I can do," but "Look at what you can overcome." In many ways, his greatest role is not on the big screen, but in the lessons he passes down to those who look up to him. Still, the emotional weight of his journey cannot be ignored. There is a sadness in his eyes at times, the kind that comes from knowing he gave everything to his art, but lost pieces of himself along the way. His health scares, particularly his heart attack in 2020, reminded him and his fans how fragile life truly is. Seeing him hooked up to hospital machines, far from the warrior image people once knew, left millions shaken. For a man who built his legacy on physical strength, confronting such weakness was crushing, but it also revealed his courage in its rawest form. The heartbreaking truth is that Jean-Claude Van Damme's story is not one of endless triumph, but of survival against the odds. His career had peaks and valleys. His personal life was riddled with challenges, and his health battles remind us of his humanity. But maybe that's why fans love him more than ever. He never pretends to be perfect. He never hides his scars. He shows us that even those who look invincible carry pain, and that true strength is not about never falling. It's about standing up again and again. At 64, Jean-Claude Van Damme may not be the man who once dazzled the world with flawless martial arts and unshakable charisma, but he has become something greater, a symbol of resilience. His body may ache, his movements may be slower, and his time in Hollywood's spotlight may have dimmed, but his spirit remains unbroken. When fans look at him now, many do cry, not just out of sadness, but out of admiration. They see the fighter who never gave up, the man who faced his demons and lived to tell the tale. Jean-Claude Van Damme's legacy is not just written in the films he made, but in the lives he inspired, the lessons he taught, and the courage he showed when the cameras stopped rolling. And so, at 64, Jean-Claude Van Damme reminds us of something deeply moving. Heroes may age, but their fight, their spirit, never truly dies. His story is not just about what he lost along the way, but about the strength it takes to keep standing when the world expects you to fall.